Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our live coverage of the latest mission from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. And Will Robinson Smith will be conducting our commentary for the duration of this coverage. We are broadcasting, as we always do, from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. For those of you who were with us earlier today for the launch of KoreaSat 6A, welcome back. If you're just joining us for your first launch of the day, welcome in. Hope you've had a good and restful Veterans Day for those who had this federal holiday off. For all those who have served our country, we certainly appreciate your service here at Spaceflight Now. We hope you enjoy this live stream. Second of the day for SpaceX, sending up a Falcon 9 rocket from its other launch pad here in the Sunshine State. Currently T-minus 58 minutes, 19 seconds, and counting to the liftoff of the Starlink 6-69 mission. On board the Falcon 9 rocket, 24 Starlink V2 mini satellites heading up to the low Earth orbit constellation. As we're getting rolling, want to thank the more than 1,000 of you who are with us in the live chat for this particular live launch coverage. If you haven't already, we'd certainly appreciate it if you could hit the like button for us. Allows more folks to find their way into our live coverage stream here. Also want to thank the folks behind the scenes. Our Stephen Young is running the technical operations of this stream today. Michael Kane was with us earlier, but we still have our Adam Bernstein out ready to track the rocket, do some still photography as well. If you're not already following the fellows on X, you can find them at their handles here on the screen. Adam is at ABurn NYC, Michael Kane at MD Kane Jr. You can also follow Spaceflight Now simply at Spaceflight Now. We're also on Threads as well as Facebook. We'll be joined today with tracking assistance by our friends P. Carsons with Max Q Productions, as well as Chuck and Jen Briggs with C&J Images. You're looking at live pictures from their video from this perspective on the Falcon 9 rocket. Still a beautiful day here in Florida as SpaceX gets ready to send up its second Falcon 9 of the day. Coming into this launch opportunity, the 45th Weather Squadron forecast an 80% chance of favorable weather, with just cumulus clouds being the watch item for a liftoff. SpaceX and the 45th are tracking moderate level of risk when it comes to the booster recovery weather on a scale of low to moderate to high. According to the company, that was the reason why they stood down from a launch opportunity yesterday, it being Sunday, November 10th. Pivoted to the backup opportunity today. So we'll see if recovery weather has improved enough to move forward with today's launch. Signs at the moment indicate that that is in fact the case, as a little more than 30 minutes ago, SpaceX did post on X that they were counting down to a Falcon 9 launch from Pad 40, quote, in about 1.5 hours from now, which would line up with the current T0 time of 4:28 p.m. Eastern. It's 21:28 UTC for our friends joining around the world. currently T minus 54 minutes, 13 seconds and counting. It's a bit breezy this afternoon, so you may see a little camera shake with our cameras here. We've got them staked down pretty decently, but there's only so much you can do with camera bounce. But you can see in this shot by the turn basin up in the upper right-hand corner just beneath our countdown clock, American flag blowing pretty consistently. So a good visual gauge of the wind speeds here. As we're continuing on with the count, do want to thank, of course, our wonderful channel member community who helps make these live streams possible. So thanks to folks like Jeff Hansen, Sulfur for Lunch, Jersey Jen, Rolly, Neville's, Justin Dawson, The Rocket Girl, and many others. Michael McLeod, good to see you. Drew P. Gambino, hello, hello. Channel membership comes with a number of perks, including discounts at our online shop, that is shop.spaceflightnow.com. Access to member-only videos here on YouTube, and of course the ability to watch all of our live launch liftoff moments here at the Cape in 4K. Also want to thank our moderators in the live chat. See, Callisti Lee is back with us this afternoon. Just scrolling to see if we've got any of the other Mars. Mark Otto checking in with us for this stream. If you do happen to see any of the other moderators pop into the chat, be sure to give them a big old hello. Want to welcome in David Sunshine joining us, the channel membership at the pad leader level. Glad to have you with us, David. And thanks to pre-existing channel member Jeff Hansen with a $5 super chat saying Happy Veterans Day. Thank you to all who have served. Michael McLeod with a very generous $25 super chat. Thank you, Michael, for supporting us at that level. Really appreciate that. And a thanks to Victorious as well for a $5 super chat. Thank you, Victorious. Appreciate your support this afternoon. These Falcon flights earlier today and this one on tap have had some notable milestones for SpaceX. Of course, the KoreaSat mission saw the first successful landing of a booster for a 23rd time. And of course, the successful deployment of the KoreaSat satellite itself, the primary objective of that mission. This launch of Starlink satellites will see SpaceX launch the largest number of V2 mini satellites that a Falcon 9 has supported to date, matching the 24 record from back in February earlier this year, with another mission to the 6th shell of the Starlink constellation. If you weren't with us for our broadcast earlier, or you just want another refresh of the countdown process here, let's go ahead and step through that. Of course, the countdown will begin with the SpaceX launch director giving the go-ahead for the start of propellant load. SpaceX runs its countdown from the Hangar X site here at the Kennedy Space Center. It's where they refurbish their Falcon boosters and prepare them for future missions, as is the case with the rocket you see there in a live box on the right-hand side of your screen. We'll talk more about the booster history of this particular rocket in just a little bit. Once the go-ahead is given for the start of fueling, that process begins at T-minus 35 minutes with the loading of RP-1, or a rocket-grade kerosene, on board the Falcon 9's first and second stages. And at the same time, liquid oxygen starts flowing on board the Falcon 9's first stage. T-minus 30 minutes, they start loading a cryogenic helium onto the pressure vessels of the Falcon 9's first stage. The helium is important because it's used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. Same is true on the second stage a few minutes thereafter. T-minus 23 minutes, loading of second stage RP1 wraps up. That's followed at T-minus 20 minutes and 50 seconds when the strong back chill down process begins. This is where they are conditioning the feed lines prior to second stage liquid oxygen load. We see it manifest as the so-called big vent. That visually begins about T-minus 20 minutes and 20 seconds. Sets up, again, second stage LOX load, which begins at T-minus 16 minutes. Moving right along, at T-minus 7 minutes is when the engine chill down sequence begins on the Falcon booster. That involves flowing a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps, helping to protect the engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence. About 6 minutes before liftoff, the first stage kerosene tank should be full. Then at T-minus 4.5 minutes, the strong back retract sequence begins. It starts with the clamp arms underneath the payload fairings opening up, and then the transporter erector, the strong back, reclines about 1.5 degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket. It stays in that position until liftoff, at which point pulls back in a much more rapid fashion to clear the way for the vertical climb of the Falcon 9. About 3 minutes before launch, the first stage LOX tank is full. Same is true on the second stage tank about a minute later. At that point, the Falcon 9 is fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. In the final 60 seconds, as we hear the call, the Falcon 9 is in startup. Control of the countdown is handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers. The propellant tanks are brought up to flight pressure. The SpaceX launch director will give their go for launch 45 seconds out. The engine ignition command is issued at T-minus 3 seconds, and if all 9 Merlin 1D engines are healthy and ignite, the command will be given for the hold down clamps to release the Falcon 9 for a T0 liftoff. Again, coming up at 4:28 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's 21:28 UTC. Or T-minus 47 minutes and counting. With the launch of the Korea Sat 6A mission earlier today, here's where the bar chart currently stands for SpaceX and its launches of the Falcon family of rockets. Looking to bring that number up to 110 in 46 minutes and 26 seconds. This, of course, is a combination of both Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy rockets, of which there were 2 that launched earlier this year. One with the final of the GOES-R series of satellites for NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. The second, of course, the Europa Clipper mission, flying a fully expendable version of a Falcon Heavy rocket, sending the Europa Clipper spacecraft off to its namesake moon of Jupiter. Now currently T-minus 44 minutes, 24 seconds and counting. As we await the SpaceX launch director to give the nod for the start of fueling, let's go ahead and talk about where this Falcon 9 is going to be flying, like that bird that's cruising across our screen right now. Very nice perch. Let's go ahead and talk about where this Falcon 9 rocket is going to be flying and where its first stage booster is going to be perched following stage separation. Taking a look at the satellite view from Slick 40 or Space Launch Complex 40 here on Florida's Space Coast. This is a mission to the sixth shell, the Starlink constellation, which means it's going to be following that green path you see here on your screen. Stage separation, the first stage booster is going to be landing on the SpaceX drone ship called a Shortfall of Gravitas. If successful, this will mark the 84th booster landing on a drone ship to date and the 366th booster landing in SpaceX history. SpaceX will also endeavor to recover the payload fairings as well as the first stage booster. They splash down in the waters of the Atlantic Ocean under the support of parachutes. Fairing halves that we saw fly earlier today supporting KoreaSat 6A flew for a fourth time each. No word on how many flights these two fairing halves have completed. SpaceX is working to certify both its first stage boosters as well as fairing halves for up to 40 flights each. SpaceX will use a recovery vessel to scoop up the fairing halves, bring them back to port. Earlier today, they used the recovery vessel called Doug. On tap this evening will be Bob. These two recovery vessels, Bob and Doug, of course, named after the astronauts who flew aboard the Demo 2 mission, now former NASA astronauts, Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley, restoring human spaceflight to U.S. soil back with that mission, which launched in May of 2020. We're now currently T-minus 39 minutes, 37 seconds and counting. Just about a minute and a half away from the point in which SpaceX launch director will nominally give the nod to go ahead with propellant load. Of course, SpaceX is able to take that poll early. They do it electronically, so if they're in a good posture, they can move forward with that before the T-minus 38-minute mark. As we're looking forward to the start of fueling, let's go ahead and talk about the payload that's flying today. Before we do that, I want to take a quick peek at the live chat here and thank some folks who are supporting us this afternoon. First off, thanks to the now 3,200 of you who are watching with us live. If you haven't already, we'd certainly appreciate it if you could hit that like button for us. Allows more folks to find their way into our live launch coverage. And I want to thank a bunch of you who have been gifting channel memberships, which is very much appreciated. First off, a welcome aboard to Scott Silberman, joining us with channel membership at the Pad Leader level, and to Nina McLean for joining us as well with membership at the Pad Leader level. Welcome aboard to the both of you. And thanks to Daniel H. for gifting 2 Spaceflight Now memberships, and to moderator and channel member Mark Otto for gifting 10. So to our now newest 14 channel members, welcome aboard to all of you. Glad to have you with us. And to those who were gifted memberships, be sure to thank Daniel and Mark in the live chat if you haven't already. We hope you decide to stick around with channel membership. Also, now is as good a time as any to remind you to subscribe to Spaceflight Now if you haven't already done so. It's a quick, easy, and free way to support the channel here. Getting close to 300,000, sitting at about 289,000 at the moment. And of course, we are ramping up for the next launch of SpaceX's Starship rocket. Our crew will be heading back down to Starbase facilities ahead of that mission and getting ready to bring you more robust live coverage from down in the Boca Chica Beach area. You'll want to be subscribed and have your notifications turned on for when new content drops in the run-up to, and of course, the actual live launch stream itself. And thanks to Callistia Lee for gifting 10 Spaceflight Now memberships. Thank you, Callistia. Appreciate that generosity. Now, T-minus 36 minutes and counting, about a minute away from the start of fueling. On board this Falcon 9 rocket are 24 of the Starlink V2 mini variety of satellite. This is SpaceX's 74th dedicated launch of these satellites so far this year. Each of them clocking at about 1,760 pounds, or about 800 kilograms. Their solar panels unfurled. They have a wingspan of about 100 feet, or 30 meters. They use argon hull thrusters for in-orbit maneuvering, as opposed to the previously used Krypton hull thrusters. They were built in Redmond, Washington, which is near Seattle. And after spacecraft separation, they'll be deployed at 180 miles, or 291 kilometers in altitude, at a 43-degree inclination. Currently at T-minus 34 minutes, 46 seconds and counting. At this point, SpaceX should be in the process of fueling its Falcon 9 rocket. However, for whatever the reason may be, SpaceX has not updated their launch page with we believe to be the current and correct T0 of 4:28 p.m. Eastern, 21:28 UTC. And so it's unclear if there's another slip of the T0 liftoff time, if SpaceX will be publishing an update to its launch page. But here's what we're looking for, as we're expecting fueling to begin, or we're expecting fueling to have begun now, and we should be seeing evidence of that in the next minute or two. So what we're looking for near the base of the Falcon 9 rocket, if you see just above the tree line, there's a slightly lighter gradient on that Falcon 9 first stage booster. Right about that point is where we start to see a frost line form, and with the super cold densified liquid oxygen flowing into the Falcon 9 rocket, that obviously interacts with the much warmer, more humid Florida air, and we start to see a little vapor once the LOX start flowing. So if SpaceX is in fact fueling its Falcon 9 rocket, we should be able to see evidence of that in that pocket of the rocket within the next minute, if not sooner. While we haven't received word from SpaceX yet, it does appear as though liquid oxygen is starting to flow on board the Falcon 9 first stage. It's a little hard to see with a bit of heat distortion we have today, but you can see that band that I was talking about expand just a little bit, which suggests that there's a frost line starting to form as the super cold densified liquid oxygen is flowing on board the Falcon 9's first stage. All that to say, now that fueling is evidently underway, SpaceX is committing to a T0 time at 4:28 p.m. Eastern, 21:28 UTC. Now currently T minus 26 minutes, 39 seconds and counting. Before we see the start of the so-called big vent here as they prepare to chill the feed lines before second stage liquid oxygen load, let's go ahead and talk about the booster that's flying this mission. It's tail number B1080 in the SpaceX fleet, going for launch number 12 today. Began its flight log with an astronaut mission to the International Space Station, a private one at that. Axiom Mission 2 or AX2, flying that same Dragon that's currently docked to the space station at the space-facing port, Crew Dragon Freedom. This particular mission, AX2, launched back on May 21st, 2023. It was former NASA astronaut Peggy Whitson's first time as the commander of a private astronaut mission, currently training to lead the AX4 crew up to the space station early next year. Next up was launch for the European Space Agency. This was the Euclid Observatory, a wide-angle space telescope. That was followed up by a couple of Starlink launches. First up was 6-11 on August 27th, and then 6-24 on October 22nd, 2023. Coming into this year, another Dragonflight, another mission for Axiom Space based in Houston, Texas. AX3, seeing the return of former NASA astronaut Michael Lopez Alegria to the commander's seat, becoming the first person to fly aboard a SpaceX Dragon capsule twice. Now the first of two, of course, with Jared Isaacman having commanded both Inspiration 4 as well as the Polaris Dawn missions. That was followed up on March 21st by a mission to the International Space Station CRS-30, making some history for SpaceX as the first Dragon 2 spacecraft to launch on an orbital flight path from Space Launch Complex 40, headed up to the space station. A couple more Starlinks to add to this booster's resume. Starlink 6-52 on April 18th, 6-62 on May 23rd. That was followed up by the Astra 1P/SES-24 satellite mission. Another flight to the space station, this time launching Northrop Grumman's Cygnus spacecraft on the NG-21 mission, the second out of 3 planned missions that SpaceX has set to launch on behalf of Northrop Grumman while it works on its next generation Antares rocket in partnership with Firefly. And most recently, Starlink 10-10, launching on October 15th. Brings us to the mission we have on tap today, Starlink 6-69, getting ready to lift off from Pad 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, under the watchful eye of that sandhill crane on the right-hand side of your screen. Been hanging out with us here for a good bit this afternoon. Being told behind the scenes that this is not, in fact, a sandhill crane, but a different kind of bird. Forgive me. I'm better versed in space than I am with avian matters. So if you happen to know what type of bird this is, go ahead and school me in the live chat. Seeing Red Dawn say heron. Callistia Lee also says heron. Janet Smith says great blue heron. Sharon Crump with a lot of specificity here, just saying, well, it's got wings, which is about as much as I could provide you on that one. As far as the launch is concerned, though, we're T minus 21 minutes, 26 seconds and counting. I'll let the great birdwatch chat go on in the live chat. Y'all can talk amongst yourselves about favorite bird sightings. A lot of bird watchers that come to the Sunshine State. I learned when I was a reporter with Spectrum News 13, did a couple of nature related stories. So some good, cool things to see at various times of the year. Coming up on the chill down of the feed lines should be getting underway right about now. We'll see that evidence by the so-called big vent here in just about 20 seconds or so. There we go. The big vent now underway. Good visual indication that fueling is proceeding on track this afternoon. This venting will continue on for about another 3.5 minutes. At T minus 16 minutes, 30 seconds and counting. The big vent has wrapped up here at the pad as SpaceX is now preparing for second stage liquid oxygen load. Final fueling milestone yet to begin on this Falcon flight. Currently T minus 14 minutes, 39 seconds and counting. So far, all continues to proceed towards a liftoff here. A little under 15 minutes. Taking a look at our live chat, want to thank the now more than 12,000 of you who are with us this afternoon, early evening. If you haven't already, we'd certainly appreciate it if you could hit that like button for us. Allows more folks to find their way into this live launch coverage. So we're getting ready to see our second Falcon 9 rocket launch of the day. T minus 12 minutes, 20 seconds and counting. As we're getting ready to see our second Falcon fly today, let's go ahead and talk about SpaceX's workhorse vehicle. Falcon 9 rocket, which stands 229 feet or 70 meters tall, has a diameter of 3.66 meters or 12 feet. We'll invert from before, start from the bottom, and work our way up to the top. First 2/3 of the rocket at the base are the Falcon 9's first stage. Today's booster, B1080, has flown 11 times before, going for an even dozen with this mission. At the base of the rocket are 9 Merlin engines, which burn a rocket-grade kerosene and liquid oxygen, producing 1.7 million pounds of thrust. Around the engine compartment are black carbon fiber landing legs, which will be used to land the first stage on the drone ship, a short fall of gravitas. Above the first stage is the inner stage. This is a composite structure consisting of an aluminum honeycomb core, which is surrounded by carbon fiber. In the image on the right-hand side of your screen, you can see the deployable hypersonic grid fins. These are titanium winglets that provide stability and steering for the Falcon 9 as it comes back into the atmosphere tail first, like a big old dart heading towards the drone ship. At the top of the inner stage are 3 mechanical latches that attach to the vehicle's second stage, and at first stage main engine cutoff, high-pressure helium is used to release those latches, and 4 pneumatic pushers ensure a clean separation. The second stage engine nozzle is also housed safely inside the inner stage adapter until stage separation. Speaking of that second stage, the upper stage of the Falcon 9 rocket, powered by a single modified Merlin engine called a Merlin vacuum engine, or an MVAC engine. It's equipped with a large nozzle which is optimized for burns in the vacuum of space, hence the name. It produces more than 220,500 pounds of thrust and will be fired twice on today's flight, placing the 24 Starlink satellites into their intended orbit. The MVAC engine burns the same prop mix, RP1 and LOX, same as the first stage. Following Starlink satellite deployment, it will ignite for a third time as deorbit burn, helping to drive the upper stage back into the atmosphere, where it will burn up, helping to eliminate the risk of creating any unnecessary space debris on this mission. Finally, at the top of the rocket are the payload fairings that are encapsulating the 24 Starlink satellites. The fairings are made up of a carbon composite material and stand 13.1 meters or 43 feet tall, and are 5.2 meters or 17.1 feet in diameter. 2 halves of the payload fairing will be recovered a little further downrange from where the first stage lands in the drone ship. They gently splash down under parachutes. And the recovery vessel Bob is on standby, getting ready to recover those fairing halves, bring them back into Port Canaveral. Same as the first stage booster. They'll be turned around for a future mission. Again, SpaceX is working to certify both the boosters and the fairing halves for up to 40 flights. Of course, the future missions that they fly are dependent on what they've flown before and what is needed of them in the future. We're now T-minus 8 minutes, 49 seconds and counting, less than 2 minutes away from the start of the engine chill-down sequence. The process involves flowing a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps, helping to protect the engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence. Now T-minus 7 minutes, 45 seconds and counting. Seeing a number of folks asking about where this Falcon 9 is going to be launching once it does leave the pad. Now that we've got a few more folks than when we first began, about 22,000 of you, let's go ahead and revisit the trajectory one more time as we get ready to see this Falcon 9 rocket launch in a little more than 7 minutes. Taking a look at a Google Earth view of Pad 40, Space Launch Complex 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. Once the Falcon 9 does leave the pad, it will fly in a southeasterly trajectory to the east of the Caribbean, and following stage separation, first stage booster will land on the SpaceX drone ship called a short fall of gravitas. This mission is set to be the 84th landing of a booster on this particular drone ship, if all goes according to SpaceX's plan. Following stage separation, the payload fairings will also be deployed and splash down in the waters of the Atlantic Ocean, a little bit further downrange from where the booster lands on the drone ship. SpaceX's recovery vessel Bob will be on deck to scoop them up out of the water and bring them on back into port. Now T-minus 6 minutes, 12 seconds and counting. About a minute past the engine chill down sequence getting underway. And in the next few seconds is when the first stage RP-1 tanker rocket grade kerosene should be full. Now T-minus 5 minutes, 30 seconds and counting. About a minute away from the strong back retract sequence getting underway. I want to thank Tim H for a $5 super chat. Thank you, Tim. Who says, great coverage. Thanks. Well, thank you, Tim, for helping to support what we do here at Spaceflight Now. Well, super chats and channel membership are great ways to support. Support doesn't always have to be monetary. We certainly appreciate the support you're sharing with your time today,
Vehicle
just being with us,
pressurizing for strong back retract.
watching our live launch coverage. And as you just heard, we're now getting some mission audio from SpaceX. We'll go ahead and bring you in, give you a pad view of the Falcon 9 rocket over there at Space Launch Complex 40.
Strong back retract has started.
Good call from SpaceX. With the call that you just heard, we'll see the opening of the clamp arms at the pad, and then the transporter erector for the strong back will recline about 1.5 degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket. Stays in that position until liftoff, at which point it pulls back in a much more rapid fashion to clear the way for the vertical climb of the Falcon 9. You can see those clamp arms opening up right there. These fairing halves look like they've got a little bit more life on them than the fairing halves that we saw earlier today, which had flown for 4 times each. I want to thank Bridget Schultz joining us with the channel membership at the Pad Leader level. Welcome aboard. We're glad to have you with us. One little bit of housekeeping here. As you can see, our countdown clock slightly different than what you see in the SpaceX big box.
Stage 1 LOX load is complete.
Good call from SpaceX, and there was a reason I was pausing because I didn't want to talk over the call out from them. Anyway, back to what I was just saying about the countdown timelines. Our clock in the upper right-hand corner of the screen is in real time. What you're seeing from the SpaceX clock is coming in on a slight delay. So, as was the case with the KoreaSat 6A mission, we'll be making our call-outs based off of our countdown timeline in real time to correlate with our tracking cameras here on the ground until we're relying on the SpaceX onboard cameras exclusively, that is.
Stage 2 LOX load is complete.
With that call from SpaceX, Falcon 9 is now fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. You're seeing the ground gas closeouts right now. They're purging the remaining locks from the feed lines.
Gas launch closeouts.
And that's that call you just heard. With just about a minute left to go before liftoff, we'll go ahead and take a pause from the live chat for now. Come back to it on the other side of liftoff.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
Good call there. We're just waiting. In about 10 seconds, we should hear the SpaceX launch director give their go-ahead for a liftoff.
Starlink 6-69, go for launch.
And with that go-ahead, we are getting ready now. 30 seconds remaining before the planned liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket. $20 seconds. 15 seconds. And here we go. In 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engine ignition and liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket on Starlink 6-69. The Falcon 9 has cleared the tower. And far fewer clouds this afternoon. A great liftoff of the Falcon 9. Some great tracking views from our team. Falcon 9 now traveling faster than the speed of sound. Approaching max Q, or the point of greatest aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle.
Max Q.
Hear that good call out. Here's what we're looking for over the next minute or so. We'll see first stage main engine cutoff, or MECO, at about T plus 2 minutes and 26 seconds. That'll be followed a few seconds later by stage separation. The Merlin vacuum engine will start at 2:36, and then the payload fairings will be deployed just before the 3-minute mark.
And vac chill has started.
That call you just heard, they're thermally conditioning the Merlin vacuum engine prior to its ignition. We're now just about 10 seconds away from MECO. MECO? Stage separation. And SES-1.
Stage separation confirmed. And vac ignition.
Good calls from SpaceX. You're seeing those events on the onboard cameras. Coming up on payload fairing deployment. There you see the fairings separate. Starlink satellites now exposed to the vacuum of space for the first time on this
Fairing
mission.
separation confirmed.
There's that view from the onboard cameras. Some great views from our tracking cameras this afternoon. Now coming up on the 4th minute into flight, we're a little more than 2 minutes away from the start of the first stage entry burn beginning. Depending on if there's a little bit of cloud cover in between here and there, we may be able to continue tracking this booster, which is what you see here on the center of your screen of the big box, all the way through the start of the entry burn. Sometimes it does get a little low on the horizon in the clouds, but we've got a pretty clear line of sight on it at the moment. And it's a little hard to see just because of the deepness of the blue here in the big box, but every now and again you could just barely make out little hints of the cold gas thrusters. Those little tiny, those are what SpaceX used to adjust the attitude or the positioning of the booster as it continues to make its way towards the drone ship. First stage booster tail number 1080 has passed its apogee, now just about 104 kilometers above surface. Now about 20 seconds away from the start of the entry burn. Entry burn should be underway now in real time, and there it is.
Stage 1 entry burn startup.
Stage 1
From
entry
hundreds of
sustained.
miles away, there's the entry burn on the Falcon 9's first stage. Well done, Pete. Now dipped into some clouds there from our ground tracking cameras, but we've got the onboard camera views now from the Falcon 9 rocket itself. Some excellent tracking work against
Stage 1
some
entry burn shutdown.
good lighting conditions today. With the conclusion of that entry burn, we are
Stage
now
2
looking
FPS has saved.
for the start of the landing burn coming up in less than a minute. I call it the FTS or flight termination system has been saved, no longer needed at this stage of flight. As you might have guessed from seeing the landing or the entry burn, the landing burn is just far too far away from our camera's positions on the ground to be able to capture too close to the horizon as well. So we'll stick with these onboard camera views from Falcon 9 rocket itself.
Stage 1 transonic.
Falcon 9 now traveling below the speed of sound as it continues to make its way back towards the drone ship, a short fall of gravitas.
Stage 1 landing burn.
Stage 2 is in terminal guidance.
The call for that landing burn, you see it there on your screen. Should be getting some views from the drone ship itself as well.
Landing leg deploy. Stage 1 landing confirmed.
And a good landing.
MVAC shut down. Nominal orbit insertion.
And some good call-outs from SpaceX there. Falcon 9 upper stage now in a good parking orbit. It will coast until about T plus 53 minutes, 56 seconds. There will be a brief 2-second burn, and that will circularize the orbit prior to the deployment of the Starlink satellites coming up at T plus 1 hour, 5 minutes, and 5 seconds. And with a good touchdown of that first stage booster on the drone ship and the Starlink satellites well on their way to deployment. I want to thank a couple more folks for your support this afternoon. Thanks to Dale Archer for a $5 super chat. Thank you, Dale. Dale asks if there's any info on where the train of satellites can be spotted from over the next few days. There are a couple of apps that do track the train of Starlink satellites. I don't have one at the tip of my tongue at the moment, but if you do, there's a good website that Steven's reminded me of called Heavens Above. You can go ahead and start there, and then expand using a quick Google search. Should be able to give you a couple of options, but Heavens Above should be a good starting point. I also want to thank Chuck Close for joining us again this afternoon with another $25 super chat. Really appreciate that generosity, Chuck. And let's go ahead and turn now to our mission stats as they currently stand with the good liftoff and landing of the first stage booster. B1080 now marking its 12th flight to space and back. This was the 393rd Falcon 9 launch to date, the 108th Falcon 9 launch of 2024. This was SpaceX's 338th Falcon booster reflight, or the launch of a booster that has flown at least once. This was SpaceX's 110th orbital launch of the year so far, including 2 Falcon Heavy rockets. This was their 124th orbital launch within the last 365 days. The 215th orbital launch from Pad 40 for SpaceX, and the 270th overall orbital launch from this particular pad. Here's where the bar chart currently stands, a reflection of those numbers we just read to you. Moving on to some recovery stats. This was the 84th landing of a booster on the drone ship, a shortfall of Gravitas. That marked the 287th SpaceX drone ship landing and the 366th overall booster landing to date. Finally, with some industry stats, this was the 78th orbital launch from Florida this year, the 117th from U.S. soil, the 128th orbital launch from U.S. rocket company, and the 210th orbital launch attempt from around the world. There have been 6 launch mishaps on the year, so here's where our pie chart currently stands. And with that, I want to go ahead and begin to wind things down. Been a busy double launch day for our team here at Spaceflight now, so going to go ahead and wrap things up so folks can break down and begin to wind down for the conclusion of this federal holiday. Although it really hasn't been much of a day off for our hardworking team, but if we have to be at work, there's no place we'd rather be than with you on a double launch day. So I want to thank our wonderful channel member community for supporting us with this second mission. If you were here for both of them, y'all are troopers, and we appreciate you coming back around the bend. Our thanks to our moderators, Clisty Lee, Aussie Space Girl, Mark Otto, for helping us out with this second live stream. Our thanks, of course, to our photographer, Adam Bernstein shooting and tracking the rocket. Big thanks to our friends Chuck and Jen Briggs with C&J Images and Pete Carsons with Max Key Productions for supporting us with tracking assistance as well. Thanks to our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, for running the technical operations of the broadcast. And most of all, thanks to you for watching wherever you happen to be checking in from around the world. Looking at another Starlink, potentially Thursday is probably the earliest that we're gauging this to be, just based off of the departure of this Falcon 9 rocket. It's going to be launching from this pad right here, Space Launch Complex 40. So if you haven't had your fill of launches, got that to look forward to in just a few days here. And then, of course, a week from today, Starship Flight 6 down at Boca Chica Beach in southern Texas. We'll be back and looking forward to the extent to which SpaceX is able to achieve with this mission, hoping to accomplish a Raptor relight as it begins its suborbital trek, mostly around the world, ahead of a splashdown in the Indian Ocean. For all of us here at Spaceflight Now, I'm Will Robinson Smith. Be good to yourselves, be good to others. With one last look at the American flag, want to wish all of our veterans here and abroad a very happy Veterans Day. And folks, we will see you next time. And until then, bye-bye.